Hi, everyone. Welcome to the presentation Working Towards a Rightful Present Social Studies System. My name is Dan Bordwell, and I am a teaching and learning specialist where basically my job is to support 140 social studies teachers across multiple sites as they teach their students our content. I'll talk about my job a little bit more in a little bit, but I'll introduce you to people who you don't see right now, but you will later in this presentation. Teachers that I support and work with: Eric Beckman, Elena Burchell, Krista Dar, David Evenson, Jen Munch, Mackenzie Menden, and Jeremy Parker. And all of us are here to talk about the work that we're doing in our school district. I will say right off the bat, our goal and objective is to share with KUFA how teachers are attempting to bring research into their daily practice and offer space for critique and feedback. And when we originally wrote this proposal, we were planning to do this in person. And honestly, like, the Minneapolis Convention Center is about a 15-minute walk from where I live. So I was really excited for you all to come. You could meet my dog. I was going to bring Brisbane, and we were going to walk on by and just be outside of the convention center, and everyone could pet him and see how great Minneapolis is. Unfortunately, we're virtual, but that's okay because it's kind of opening some doors for us in other ways. However, for our purposes, this space for critique and feedback is going to have to be done offline, and via email and other conversation that we can have. But definitely, this presentation will be at you, but I don't want it to be at you. I want you to interact with us, myself, and the teachers in this presentation, because we have a lot that we can learn back and forth from each other. So, how this presentation is going to work is we are doing the introduction right now. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how our school district works. It's a bureaucratic organization, and I'll just talk to you a little bit about that. And then we're going to spend a lot of time hearing from the teachers who I introduced on the previous slide and how they're doing this work. And I put that in quotation marks because they'll unpack that a little bit more as we get forward. And then we'll end with next steps of where we're going, but definitely want to have some collaboration with you because you're deciding to watch this later on. This is going to be a really great interactive session in person, but we roll with everything. So here is some basic information about our district. We're located just north of Minneapolis, serving first and second ring suburbs, as well as rural exurbs as well. We have about 38,000 students. We are Minnesota's largest school district, with 62% of our students white, 13% Black and African, and you can see the rest. About a third of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Almost a fifth of our students receive some sort of special ed services, and 7% of our students are English language learners. Our district mission is to effectively educate each of our students for success. And to think about what that means, we have to think about what is the purpose of social studies and how are we meeting the needs of all of our students so that they can see themselves in our curriculum. That's something that we are definitely working towards, and that is what this presentation is all about. In our social studies department, we have about 21,000 students taking secondary social studies classes every single day. And we have 9 required courses as well as a number of electives that students can take. In Minnesota, all Minnesota middle schoolers take Minnesota Studies, US Studies, and Global Studies in that order in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then in high school, the only requirement from the state of Minnesota is that there are 3 credits of social studies taught. We have 4 credits in our district that are taught. And in teaching the state standards, we currently have civics and human geography in 9th grade, in 10th grade, US history, 11th grade, world history, 12th grade, economics, and 12th grade, government and politics. And we're on a 5 by 3 trimester schedule for our high school. So civics, human geography, econ, and GoPo are 1 trimester courses. The rest are 2 trimesters for our students. We also have a number of AP and um, um, classes and honors classes in our high school as well. So my job as a teaching and learning specialist is to support teachers both with the curriculum and professional development. On the curriculum side, our curriculum is based upon the previous Minnesota state standards that were being worked on in 2011 and 2012. So all of our courses are currently teaching all of the state benchmarks. And just like other benchmarks across the country, they're very binary, that students get it or they don't, and they're very normative of who is included and isn't included. Our school board really wants, because we have so many sites, we have 5 traditional high schools, 6 traditional middle schools, a number of alternative sites as well. Our school board wants a guaranteed and viable curriculum across all of our buildings. So if a student transfers, or if a family's at a hockey game, and they're talking about what's going on in civics, they're not going to see something that's going to be completely different. They're going to see a very organized curriculum that does allow for teacher autonomy. And that's part of the loose versus tight aspects of our curriculum. We When we write courses, we place our benchmarks in different courses, and then from there in different units we have a scope and sequence that will say this unit should be a minimum of 7 days, a maximum of 12 days. And from there, teachers can kind of decide, and within buildings, collaborative teams can decide what they want to do and how they want to teach our curriculum, so long as they're teaching our learning targets, and they're getting students ready for a common summative assessment, which is a district final. We have two parts of our common summative assessment in our social studies classes. One is a multiple choice test, which is very low depth of knowledge, one or two level questions to see if kids are getting it or not. And then we have something called a high level question, HLQ, where students read an article, find evidence from that article, and tie it back into what they've learned about in their class as a whole. But that's our curriculum. We have curriculum documents, they're available for our teachers, but they're kind of old because Minnesota State social study standards have not been through rulemaking for revisions since 2012. There are new standards that are on the way. Once we have those new standards, our curriculum will change and we'll rewrite courses as well. But we're not there yet. In addition, we do have a district equity plan. So this came about 7 years after our courses were rewritten. Um, and part of our district equity plan says, one, we have to provide course offerings designed to explore the perspectives of underrepresented groups in every high school. And two, enhance current course offerings and curriculum to reflect perspectives of underrepresented groups. This came at a great time for social studies because we were already doing this, but now we have a board backed policy that says we are going to be supported in how we do this work. And this next slide kind of talks about this work a little bit more. So, there are two major initiatives that our department has been working on, and I started this job in 2018. And before I started, at the end of 2017-2018 school year, there were two things that were laid in the groundwork for when I came on to this job. The first was the Social Studies Lit Project and literacy coaches. We took a look at our reading scores and we realized district wide that we could do better, just as every school district could. And the spot where we wanted to devote resources was working on social studies, since we're a text heavy discipline. So we got some literacy coaches. We were able to have some teachers find articles for us. Teachers got professional development on infusing literacy into their daily practice. And that was not just giving kids a textbook and say, hey, go read this, but empowering teachers to not only A, center their teaching on literacy, but B, give students pre-reading, during reading, post-reading strategies that would allow students to be able to access the text, whether that is the textbook, a map, a video, whatever the case may be, to make meaning and turn that meaning into writing or discussing. The second initiative that we had was what we called at the time racial infusion. And we started working with Dr. Keith Mays from the University of Minnesota, and he consulted with us to do kind of two tracks simultaneously. On one hand, we developed an elective called Honors African American History, that was a one trimester course in all of our high schools. And on the other hand, we were taking a look at our existing learning targets that are written off of the 2011-2012 benchmarks and find different ways where we could look at power, privilege, and race. And not just those three, but also class and gender and all those. But we did focus on race, and find different ways where we could recenter what we were doing. And I want to show you an example, and this is from Brooks's presentation at AERA in 2012. And this is kind of an example that I use with teachers me sitting at ARA, I saw this visual and I was like, yes. So, if we think about different ways that we can teach different aspects of history or any of our courses, it's not just history, it can be geography or econ or Minnesota studies, whatever the case may be. There's always going to be that normative version that gets taught. And on this picture, we see Christopher's class. This is Christopher, a teacher teaching about the civil rights era. You've got Earl Warren, Justice Black, Andrew Jackson, Eisenhower, a little girl in Kansas, and she. You could easily teach the Minnesota benchmarks the way that Christopher is teaching them. On the other side, you got Talia. You got people that you'd suspect to see: MLK, Rosa Parks, Ruby Bridges. But you also have Sylvia Mendez. You've got Linda Brown actually named. You got Linda Brown's mother. You got Colin Kaepernick. You got Ellen DeGeneres. It's more intersectional, and it also spans an arc of time rather than just talking at a specific moment, but it is connecting elements to today. So I have showed this to our school board, I've showed it to teachers, and I've always asked, what class would you rather be in, Christopher's or Talia's? And almost everyone, and that hundreds of people that I've asked, has said Talia. And so the work that we're trying to do in Anoka Hennepin is empower our teachers to be more like Talia rather than Christopher. And that's a big task. And we know that's a big task for a lot of different reasons: the apprenticeship of observation, pressure from test, pressure from admin, pressure from community, trying to fit everything in, teacher background knowledge. All of those things are difficult. But you're going to see today some teachers doing the work. And that's why we're here at KUFA, because all the work that you're doing at KUFA, that research inevitably has to manifest down into the classroom and help teachers teach our students to learn social studies. Because if we don't do that, then what's the point of us doing this research? So, moving forward, if my mouse will go, a couple of years ago, I thought about what our purpose as a social studies department ought to be. Because even though I'm at the district office and I support teacher work, I'm a teacher. I'm on the teacher contract. I don't have any hiring or firing or evaluation roles. But I wanted to guide the work that our teachers do, even though they report to other people and are in different buildings, and each building and each collaborative team has different needs. So, the question that guides my work, that I've shared with the teachers, that I hope guides their work, is: how might Anoka Hennepin social studies render the discourse of invisibility visible so that our classrooms can become a location of possibility? So, unpacking that very quickly, this is a question because, first of all, teachers have to decide whether they want to answer the question or not. Do they just want to do the status quo, Bueller, 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 and just lecture and do the chalk and talk show and talk at kids? Or do they want to empower kids? And then in empowering them, what are the different avenues and ways that we can do this? We know that good teaching looks very different. We know that there are things that I would do as a teacher that are authentic to me, that are best practice, and other elements of best practice aren't as natural to me. So there are different avenues that we can approach this work. We know, as social studies researchers, about the discourse of invisibility, talking about Gloria Latz-Billions and Ashley Woodson's work, that there are discourses that are just ignored completely. And that is true within our curriculum. It's true within our curriculum documents. So then the question is, how do we bring those forward? How do we render them visible? How do we recenter them so that the topics that we're teaching are at the center? And then, as Bell Hooks says, how can our classrooms and pedagogies be a location of possibility? Like, I don't think there's any teacher out there who doesn't want their student to have all of the things possible to them and have learning be a space for them to have that location where they can see whatever is possible for them. So this is a guiding question that guides the work that I do in supporting the teachers with curriculum development, as well as the professional development that is organized for them. We do have a lot of data points to say that what we're doing is actually making an impact. So we have, as I mentioned, our common and summative assessments, our district finals, and we have had and still have a gap between our white students and our students of color. And we've rewritten our tests and we've looked at why that is taking place. Once we started doing this infusion work where teachers had targeted professional development, were able to see elements that they could add into their curriculum, we saw the gap between our white students and students of color decrease by 10%. We've also seen an increase in our high school reading scores. So we have seen that not only are students learning more, they're able to do more and see more skills. We've done teacher surveys where 94% of teachers said that they've changed at least one lesson, which, that's great. That's a starting point. It's not that much, but it's something. We have tons of different artifacts, and you'll see some of those at the end of our presentation of how teachers have changed what they've tied in. And then the other thing that I'll stress, along with the MCA reading scores, is that we've done way more work on literacy. We've done a lot of this infusion, and I'll talk about why I don't like to call it infusion, but why we call it infusion a little bit through literacy and the coaches that we've done. And there's another presentation that Jody Baker and I. Jody Baker is a colleague of mine here in Anoka Hennepin, have done, and it's called Literacy Coaching as a Means of Transformative Teaching. So that's another session that I would encourage you to watch because they go hand in hand about the work that our social studies department is doing. So I just mentioned I don't like to use the term infusion, but when we started this work, we just said, hey, let's be real. Let's see where our teachers are at. Let's take a look and know that we have to teach the Minnesota benchmarks. We don't have a tremendous opportunity or time or capacity to totally rewrite all of our curriculum, nor would we want to do that because in 2020, the Minnesota Department of Education started rewriting the social studies standards. And that process is still ongoing, and I'll talk about those at the end of this presentation. But we didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start anew, knowing that we'd have to start anew again. So we started with infusion. But infusion is problematic because it maintains the status of the hierarchies that exist. So we have talked about as a district different ways to talk about the work that we're doing, and rightful presence seems to be one of those ways that we're trying to do. And it's trying to be justice oriented. It's a project that focuses on looking at the injustices in the past and kind of righting them. It's a recentering. So going back to that image of Brooks's study, looking at two different teachers, to not be like Christopher and only talk about white folks in the civil rights movement and not name Linda Brown, but be more like Talia and not only just talk about Brown versus Board, but talk about who Linda Brown was, talk about the Mendez case, talk about the effects of Brown versus Board of Education, tying it into today, recentering in a way that truly values the work and the history and the people that are involved. It's not indoctrination, it's adding more to the story. So we started working with Keith Mace, who is a great resource to do this work. We had that consultant model. We said to ourselves, we want to work with him as long as we can, but we also need to do this work ourselves. We're predominantly white teachers in a suburban area. We need to better educate ourselves. We need to grow our own students so they want to come back and be teachers. We want to be able to do the sustainability on our own. So there's a lot of work that we're doing as we go forward in doing this work. Overall, each year, we have 4 days of department-led professional development that's planned by me, the teaching and learning specialist, um, as well as building department leaders. So I work with about 18 different department leaders, and we take a look at what are our needs for the department. We've also offered optional after-school sessions for teachers, and we've had optional summer book clubs. So in the past, we've done after-school sessions where we went through the 1619 project before it was controversial. And then we've also done summer book clubs where we've read books like Cast, Katrina, Evicted, different books taking a look at different intersectionalities that exist within our curriculum. We've relied on some CUFA past and present friends. Bettina Love came and gave a keynote to kick off our 2019-2020 school year. We've had my doctoral advisor, JB Mayo, talk about some of the work that he's done. And he's a really great example of a specific event that he came in and talked to our teachers about queer folks in the Harlem Renaissance. And there were teachers in there just listening and learning and wanting to learn. Obviously, the work that we're doing is controversial in this political time. So we talked with Dr. Rebecca Cooper Geller about different ways that we should approach doing this work and how to be mindful that talking about race and honoring identity shouldn't be controversial, and it can't be avoided, because when you do so, you're erasing students and you're asking some students to subtract who they are, and we shouldn't be doing that. We've also had Molly Siebert and George Daubel, who are KUFA attendees, and other folks come in. And we've really tried to empower within our district as well the work that we're doing. So the fact that we have a better capacity to do more hybrid and virtual professional development going forward, I'd love to connect with more people here at KUFA, because the work that you're doing is going to help our work moving forward. So it's 2021, and every school district's favorite letters are CRT. I'm not going to really talk about how that's affected the work that we're doing, for a couple reasons. One, I think it derails our conversation of where we're going. We're going to continue to go in our direction. We're going to continue to teach Minnesota benchmarks, to follow our district equity achievement plan, and do best practice, research based best practice social studies for our students. My email has been requested as part of a Freedom of Information Act. All the professional development that I provided, I'm sure this presentation itself will be requested in a data request and turned over to community members who think that we're trying to indoctrinate students. So first of all, hello, I'm Dan. I'm a nice person, not trying to indoctrinate the students. But second of all, it would be naive of me to say that CRT and that debate and backlash that's taking place across the country isn't taking place in our district. It is, and it's definitely at the forefront and centered at a lot of teachers' minds, because they're doing a lot of really great work, but they're questioning, am I going to get in trouble for this? And they're not, but that's something that's in the back of their mind of what's happening right here. So I've spoken for longer than I've wanted to, but now you're going to actually be hearing from teachers. And again, this would have been a great collaborative environment where we would have had roundtables or chairs and circles where the teachers would be able to talk about a bunch of different things. The way that this worked is I invited all teachers who participated in our summer book clubs in 2020 to be part of a KUFA proposal that we worked on when that call came out. So there were about 50 teachers I emailed, and we've got 10 or 12 teachers responding. But obviously, with 2021 and COVID, and being a teacher right now is really tough. The number of teachers who participated kind of dropped down because this is an extra thing that they had to add on to them. So it's going to be a little bit less, but you are going to hear from 6 different teachers right now of how they approach the work, how they're working within the system, the context of what they're doing, how professional development has impacted them, and some other cool projects as well. And then I'll come back and at the end and just kind of tell you where our next steps are. So bye to my face, but going on, we're going to start with Elena Birchall, and she's going to just talk about like the connection between history and today and why she does the work that she does.
There was a protest that happened on I-94, a major freeway that connects our downtown areas of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I had a friend expressing frustration, and I don't understand why they are shutting down this freeway. And I realized as I listened to my friend talk that there was a disconnect of the events of our past here in the state of Minnesota and current events, and that too many of my friends and colleagues and the students and neighbors don't understand how we're still dealing with events of the past and how they still connect with us and are still impacting us today. And that's really what led me to what I'm working on today with my projects and my classes. I am a teacher of economics and geography, and I dork out love maps, and I especially love ArcGIS. And as I've started teaching economics in the last couple of years, I have been trying to bring in mapping and real world data and showing these historical events and overlaying them and helping students to see how they impact us economically still today. There was a protest that happened on.
Jeremy Parker is a literacy coach who works with teachers in two different buildings, and here he is talking about fostering the work.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Parker, and I am a literacy coach in our district, and I support two separate high schools. Uh, in terms of what this work looks like for a literacy coach, I feel like my role is really to make sure the conversation keeps happening. So we have district level conversations, but really, what does it look like in each individual classroom, and how can I help facilitate collaboration between teachers, whether that is organizing book studies or other collaborative endeavors? Um, we always have to ask questions: whose voice is being represented, whose voice is being silenced, and how is every single student allowed access or provided access to content, and how are we removing barriers and making sure these topics are constantly being questioned, poked, and prodded, and really enabling a high level of reflection from teachers. I feel like that's my biggest role as a literacy coach.
Mackenzie Menden and Krista Dar are 8th grade global studies teachers, and they're defining the work.
How are we defining this work? The way that we're defining the work that we've been doing is looking to grow and improve our curriculum a little bit. We're trying to be very intentional about the voices and the stories that are being told in our curriculum. We recognize the biases that go into the fact that our collaborative team is for middle class white people. So we recognize that there are stories that have been missed in the past, and we are trying to be intentional about bringing those stories and those voices into our work. So that's how we are defining our work.
We're going to see two clips from Dave Evenson, a teacher at Champlain Park High School.
I've been looking to increase student engagement and learning, and I want students to be able to see themselves not only in the curriculum or the classroom. And so I try to make sure that all of the groups that attend the school, ethnically, racially, gender, are represented in my classroom, both on the classroom walls and also in the material. I feel that when students are learning about themselves, they feel a lot more engaged, and I try to offer them that opportunity as well as choice. I've been looking to.
And Dave has more about students seeing themselves.
I graduated from the high school in the northwest suburbs, not too far from where I currently teach. About 25 years ago. At that time, we were celebrating diversity. That was written on the walls of the classroom. Our principals had said it, and I understood their explanation of it. However, I do not feel that they really were celebrating diversity in the way that we do at this school here. It definitely was not seen on the classroom walls. It wasn't seen in the dress code. It wasn't seen in the curriculum. It definitely wasn't seen at the pep fest or the dances. And I feel like here at Champlain Park, we've done a good job of listening to those student voices, trying to help students see themselves in our activities, let them have a voice, listen to the voice, and react to that voice in a helpful manner. Also strive to be able to walk through our school and see their artwork, see their religion, see their background, see their culture, and welcome and actually truly celebrate diversity in a way that I feel was missed in my past schools. I graduated.
And Jen Munch talking about the work.
When I think of the work that we're doing here in Anoka Hennepin with social studies education, I view it as sort of an ongoing transformative process in which we are developing not only a greater understanding of our curriculum and the different voices in which different voices that are heard and the different voices that are left out. But I think we are developing a better understanding of who we are as educators and who we want to be as educators, and then really taking that knowledge and then developing a greater understanding of who our students are and who the students, the backgrounds of the students and the community in which we serve, as it is becoming increasingly more diverse. In the 17 years that I have been in my building, I have seen the school go through some certainly large shifts in demographics, and I myself am even a graduate of the district. And so it's kind of this evolution and ongoing conversation that I think teachers are having with themselves and our departments, and really, again, investing in the students who are in front of us every day and taking a time out, like a thoughtful and more deliberate approach to being the best educators we can. Of course.
So we've heard a lot about student voice and a little bit about the teachers. Jeremy is adding more about teacher positionality.
When I think about my approach to professional development, the way I receive PD, the way I facilitate it with others, I have to be very well aware of my position in the world as an able-bodied cisgendered white man, and when I have professional development around infusion and instructional equity, I have a very limited view of what it means to be oppressed. I don't really know what that feels like, whose voices need to be present. I have an idea of who those voices are, but what are those voices saying? That is something that, in terms of professional development, I have to be the conduit and help those messages go from point A to point B. And I am not the keeper of this knowledge, but I can help create the systems that enable those conversations to happen. When I think
And Jen back again talking about the professional development.
This professional development continues to be a wonderful and enriching and ongoing opportunity for me to find ways for the student voice to be heard. And of course, students look to me or any teacher as the content expert, but by finding areas for the student voice and opportunities for the student voice to be heard, that gives students the opportunity to learn from each other and to acknowledge and to realize that the student sitting next to them hasn't had the same life experiences that they have, and that perhaps just because something is different doesn't mean it's wrong. And of course, we're trying to take that fear factor away a little bit, of course, as well, because sometimes people tend to fear the unknown, or they have stereotypes or assumptions about people who are different than them. And so I feel like it has been through this professional development, it has been less about me and what I need to accomplish, and more about my students and what my students' needs are, and opportunities that I can allow students not only to see themselves, but allow them to shine in the classroom as well.
So obviously, being north of Minneapolis, our community has experienced several aspects of trauma and police violence. And Mackenzie and Krista are back to talk about the effects of the murder of George Floyd.
How has the violence in our community impacted your teaching? Our community is about 20 miles away from Minneapolis, and so it has very directly impacted us. If we rewind to end of May 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, it very directly impacted our community on a day-to-day basis. At that time, we were distance learning, so we only saw our students, of course, via video and via emails and conversations. And pretty much the entire last week of school that we had was checking in on students to make sure that they were doing okay, checking in on their social emotional health, and trying to help these eighth graders process through what they were seeing. They saw our community on a national news network and international news, and that's hard for anyone to process through, especially middle school students. So trying to help them process through that was a challenge, and still is. So to fast forward to present day 2021, we still feel a little bit of lack of trust from the community in some ways. And especially while we were distance learning, we were doing video teaching, of course, and we didn't know what parents were on the other end of that video watching over their kid's shoulder, kind of judging and dissecting every single thing we said and taught. And so we were very cautious about that. We were very worried about that. And there is a little bit more questioning of what teachers are teaching and how. And yeah, it makes us feel a little bit less trusted by the community. And I think that's not a great feeling for anybody, as we have been working really hard to do our best. But all of these other situations that have happened outside of our building has made that challenging.
And Jeremy talks about the need of dialogue as a resident of Minneapolis teaching in the suburbs.
So I live in South Minneapolis, within walking distance where George Floyd was murdered. And when the Minneapolis police precinct was burned to the ground, charred ruins were blown into my front yard. So this situation was very front and center for me. And commuting into the northern suburbs, there were a lot of misconceptions, a lot of fear, a lot of stereotypes about what happens in the city, who lives in the city. Bad things might come north into the suburbs. And the way I kind of viewed my role, just being in that unique situation, is that we needed to have dialogue. We needed to have high levels of collaboration and a place for people to voice concerns and ask questions and get answers. And high levels of collaboration, and these conversations don't happen by accident, particularly when everyone is at home trying to make sense of it from their living room.
So obviously there are struggles, and some of the teachers have already mentioned the struggles that they've seen, and Krista and Mackenzie are back to talk a little bit about that.
Do you feel that the system is supporting your work? And in what ways are they, and what ways are they not?
So at our school, we're the largest school district in the state. And so we do feel very supported. We are lucky enough to have a teaching and learning specialist.
Okay, I thought I cropped this. They're going to talk good about me. So we'll just skip to the part where they don't have to talk good about me.
Did a lot from having a very engaged teaching and learning specialist in our department. We also feel really lucky and privileged to work with professional colleagues who are continuing to do the work, who really are invested in social studies and also the best, or wanting the best for our students. Unfortunately, there's also some drawbacks of being the largest school district in the state. And one of them is that change can be hard and cumbersome. It can be very time consuming. It can take a lot of effort from a lot of people over many, many years to see even sometimes the smallest changes. And then currently, with the political climate the way it is, we know that we're a little bit more under a microscope than we've been in the past few years. And so there is a little bit more hesitancy, I think, from teachers to take a ton of new risks because of potential backlash that could occur.
Elena is back to talk about some difficulties in a different way.
One of the biggest struggles I've had in creating the lesson plans that I'm working on is just the complexity of what I'm trying to all bring together into a student digestible lesson plan. Understanding that as myself and my colleagues usually specialize in just a couple of topics, trying to bring them all together gets quite intense. So trying to bring a succinct definition of what happened with racial covenants and with redlining HLC and with the freeway system coming through, getting that historical knowledge. And then I've been doing it through mapping, so understanding how to use the mapping software. And then on top of that, it's into an economic classroom, so using all the economics principles and making sure I'm embedding them deep in state standards. This has been the hardest part of my job, is bringing it all together.
One last time with Mackenzie and Krista talking about community support.
Do you feel the community at large is supportive of our work?
I would say that pockets of our community are very supportive of our work. It directly impacts them and it affects them. And so, in that way, we feel a lot of support from a lot of our students and a lot of families. Of course, there's other pockets of our community that do not prioritize our work and so feel that our time and energy and money should be going elsewhere. And I think you kind of experience that in all districts and in all areas. And we experience the same. Some support and some, of course, that are not as supportive.
So now let's take a look at two different units of study that have been taking place and redesigned because of the opportunities provided by them and desired by the teachers. Here's Dave talking about how he's changed his unit on urban geography.
I was in a summer PD writing session led by Dr. Keith Mays and Dr. Dan Borwell, and there was a few peers with me there as well too, and we started to look at what units we could kind of flip and make more engaging for our students. We looked at the urban unit, which could be taught from different urban cities from around the United States or around the world, and we started to look at how we can concentrate on the Twin Cities here. And so we started a project that ended up being named Adopt a Neighborhood. Essentially, we teach the whole unit through Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Champlin, Dayton, where our students come from, and so they can actually see themselves in the everyday learning. We teach the topics like central place theory from right down the street. We look at centric models by looking at the cities themselves. We look at gentrification from real pictures that the students have seen of gentrification. We talk about the Top Golf that is right down the road and what that means to our students that are here in the area. Since flipping this lesson and turning it more to a project base, I have received excellent feedback from students. On average, 25% of them write in their final reflection that this was the most important thing that they learned in this class and the thing that they will take with them. And I also include in that I have had emails and calls from parents on several occasions thanking me for the lesson, and I actually had a parent come in who was a son of Rondo, and he wanted to thank me personally for being able to teach his son a little bit about where he grew up. I feel like when students can see their histories and what we're learning, they're going to understand where we're at today a little bit better. They're going to have a little bit more empathy for the people around them and feel like that.
Okay, so Dave did that unit in geography, and one of the great things about our district is the level of collaboration. And Alana took that unit and made that an economics unit. And she mentioned this before, here's her Adopt a Neighborhood project.
This is a lesson that kind of started out as a geography lesson, and then I'm trying to bring it into an economics classroom. I've been working with some local professors at a couple of universities and colleagues at other schools, looking at having students research individual neighborhoods throughout the Twin Cities area, and they have a whole variety of things that they're looking at, as you can see on my list on the left. And then I also encourage students to bring up their own points of inquiry. What else do we need to know? And at the end of the lesson, what I ask students to do is looking at just their neighborhood they research to tell me how healthy they think that the economy of that neighborhood is. And then if they put on the hat of the Fed or of Congress, what would they do to try to improve conditions for just that neighborhood? So that's kind of the end goal with this particular project. But in that, we embed all sorts of things. So I'm trying to make it a personal finance lesson that builds to this macro level. So I begin, before I even touch this map, talking about home loans and looking at what does that impact for your short-term and long-term financial health. And then we look at historical interest rates and how does having an interest rate at different times as it goes up and down, how does that impact my economic health as an individual, personal finance? And then from there, we go into this redlining racial covenant, and we can see that all these racial covenants have been mapped throughout Hennepin County, right on Minneapolis. So I have students look at that, and what does that mean if these people in these communities are forced into different neighborhoods? And then as that racial covenants leads into redlining practices, HOLC, and each of these different color blocks, you would have either denied access to a home loan or having a higher or lower interest home loan. How does that impact these different communities? And then from there, we also throw in the freeways very briefly at the end. But there's all sorts of data that they can look into. And I really don't want this to be a lesson where I'm saying, here is the answer, because some of these are very complex neighborhoods. And what you think might happen isn't always what happens there. So it's always interesting to see what the students come up with as they look through this data.
So, back on the webcam here. Um, Obviously, those teachers are just a sample of the about 140 social studies teachers that we have. But the work that they're doing is really great. And I'm, again, sad that we are presenting in this format rather than face to face, because I think there could have been a lot better dialogue that we could have. But by all means, please reach out to all of us if you want to talk anymore. The next steps that we have as a district is to wait for the new Minnesota Social Studies standards to come out. Check them out. I was on the committee, and it's a story, and I'm glad to tell you about that at some other time. But I can say that the new standards are a whole lot better than our current standards, and that they are recentering the voices and perspectives that are so badly needed. And it will give students all across Minnesota and teachers all across Minnesota different avenues to learn some of the same things that they're doing, but through different lenses and perspectives. As of today, when I'm recording this on November 10th, the second draft has been released, but the third draft that the committee has finalized is in the hands of our commissioner, and we're waiting to see when that will be sent to an administrative law judge to go into rulemaking. And those new standards are to be taught 2025 or 2026. But definitely check them out. We are starting our four-phase adoption process right now, knowing that the standards are coming. This is it's 40 plus different steps of looking at our curriculum. We're starting our study year in January, where we'll have community members, administrators, teachers, and look at what our scope and sequence ought to be. There's going to be a new ethnic studies strand within the Minnesota standards. So we'll think about what does that mean for us. We'll think about, do we want to keep U.S. history at 10th grade, or do we want to move that to 11th grade? All of those conversations will take place. We are, as Krista, I believe, mentioned, sometimes it takes a long time for our district to make change because we have such large bureaucracy. And that is true. For example, some of our government and politics teachers wanted to bring in Just Mercy as a supplemental text. And I had to go to the school board 3 different times and do a bunch of different steps in between to get Just Mercy approved as a supplemental text for our 12th graders. But now we have 3,000 kids reading excerpts from Just Mercy every year. It took a year and a half to get there, but now every year we have that taking place. So we do have a very rigorous adoption process when we are making changes, but once we make change, that change is committed. We're going to continue to work to meet the needs of our teachers to successfully teach evidence-based best practices. We want to render those discourses of invisibility visible. We want to keep recentering. As a student of this district, and I graduated in 2004, I definitely identify holes that existed in my curriculum. So, as a white cisgender able-bodied male, there are things that I didn't learn that I should have learned in high school, and middle school and elementary school. The system didn't work as well as it could have. So we're working to make that system be great for all of our students, so that all of our students can get the most complete picture of whatever their course is, whether it's geography, that they can connect those big concepts to their community, or to they can see themselves and they can see other people. The other thing that I'll mention too is that the new Minnesota standards are more inquiry based off of the C3, where our previous standards weren't. So we want to provide students those opportunities for inquiry moving forward. So those are our next steps. It's a lot of work to do. By all means, please reach out, provide feedback for us. Anoka Hennepin is a very interesting district, just geographically. Definitely encourage you to learn more about our district and its history, its richness, and its not so rich history. It's about some of the struggles that we have to meet the needs of all of our students. But with the teachers who are here and the other teachers who are doing the work, I can confidently say that we are doing what is best for our students, and helping try to create that rightful presence and rightful place as we do that work. So, again, thank you for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions or comments, and have a wonderful rest of your day and conference.